This is Lords of the Fallen, and this is the latest Unreal Engine 5 game. And it's been filling up headlines, forum posts, and Steam reviews with people complaining about its bad performance and stability on PC. So I thought I definitely want to check this out. And I'm currently on the game's minimum supported hardware. If you look at the system requirements list, I'm on a GTX 1060 6GB, and okay, well, the game just crashed. So I'll go ahead and start it back up and tell you a little bit more about it. And we're back. I'm gonna leave that in the video. I've been playing the game for 3 or 4 hours now and on a variety of hardware. And that's actually the first major just crash while playing the game that I've seen. But hey, bad timing, but we'll leave it in the video. It's a fair game, it did happen. Anyway, we're on the minimum recommended specs for the game. This is, or minimum, not even recommended. This is the GTX 1060. I'm on an i5 9600K CPU. The game recommends an i5 8400, so this is just one generation newer than that. I've got 16 gigabytes of RAM, as well as the game installed on an SSD, as is recommended. However, this is just a SATA SSD, not a fast NVMe or anything. We'll test out some other hardware here. Also, the game developers are very quick in the forum posts and everything to say, leave the game on auto settings. Well, the auto settings for this configuration was low everything, foliage quality off, and then motion blur, film grain, and chromatic aberration turned on. So we'll definitely start out here. Display settings, again, we're at 1080p, and it defaulted to a 50% resolution scale. So this is probably 540p. 50% resolution scale usually means per axis. So this would be 540p basically, and it didn't default to doing it through FSR, so it's using the Unreal Engine TAA-based upscaler. Let's go ahead and run in here. Also turn on the average counter. Now notice as I came up these stairs, so one complaint about the game is, Unreal Engine stutter, which is not shocking. If you watch the frame time graph, as I load into new areas, it can have a bit of stutter if it's kind of, I think, unloaded and then reloads the next area. I haven't found it too, some people find it a lot more obnoxious than others. If I head back over here and then go back up the steps, I have a feeling we'll see those same stutters hit us again. Again, a little bit of a stutter as we go up the ladder, running up here. Nothing too, there's the stutter right there. So yeah, little bits of stutter as it loads into new areas, that kind of thing. But the overall frame rate average is over 60 at these settings. Let's go ahead and, again, get a little bit of a stutter as I turn the corner there. So there certainly is some amount of stutteriness to it, at least on this level of hardware. This seems to be one of the first major actual boss fights, and it does trigger a loading zone. So rather than beating the boss, that's my excuse for not having beat the boss yet, I figured we'd actually test a variety of hardware here. You can see that as you load into the cutscene, and I even saw this on the high-end hardware, did you see how the increased detail on the armor kind of took a second to load in? We're also getting some little loading stutters if you look at the frame time graph during the cutscene. Every time it seems to kind of transition the camera a little bit. See that again, the stutter on the frame time graph. So certainly not perfect. Let's go ahead and get into some combat right here. And then I'd actually like to test out some other hardware. Or maybe other settings on this hardware. You can't really pause in combat or anything, but I'm not doing too well because I'm staring at the frame time. That's my excuse. This is definitely very, very Dark Souls inspired, but does seem to have its own cool little thing going on with the Umbral world, which I could maybe show you a little bit in the video. But overall, this combat is feeling fairly smooth. Most of our issues were stutters, like I said, running around more of the actual world and then during the cutscene. And I'm gonna get blasted here. But yeah, when you're in combat and you're not getting Unreal Engine stutters happening, even on this level of hardware, the game does seem to be running okay at its auto settings. Now keep in mind, this is 540p internal resolution. It definitely looks pixelated, especially in motion, and low basically everything. But it's not the absolute end of the world. And I'll also mention that while I don't think I'll try to capture any of it for this video, I have also been playing on my Steam Deck. I actually played mostly on the Steam Deck up until this point. And I've actually managed to stay mostly at a 30 FPS lock with occasional stutters below that. Again, on a couple hours of play. It has not been, clearly I haven't beat the game yet on any hardware, not just the Steam Deck. But yeah, overall, compared to other Unreal Engine 5 games I've tried playing on the Steam Deck, like Immortals of Avium and, why is it slipping my mind, Remnant 2, this one actually seems to be performing better for me on the Steam Deck side of things and on this lower end hardware. So yeah, overall, I'm gonna go ahead and just stand here and die while we, I think, load into some other graphic settings. You'll see, by the way, when you die once, you go into the Umbral world, so some kind of like spirit world that you have constant access to through a magical lantern. I'm intentionally dying here, though, so that we can maybe try out... Okay, that was basically everything as low as it possibly goes. The internal resolution of 540p does look very pixelated, though, so I'm curious if we try a little bit more on this min-spec hardware and be like, okay, what if we want to sacrifice the 60 FPS that we are actually getting, at least in this area? Again, maybe other areas of the game are more difficult. And try cranking the resolution scale back up to actually 1080p. I'm curious if we could at least get like a 30 FPS experience at the native resolution. I'll restart the frame rate counters. So, actual 1080p. This certainly feels a bit more sluggish. So I see why the game would default to the lower internal resolution. But so far, I was gonna say mostly over 30 FPS, but yeah, no, we're definitely dropping into the 20s here. So yeah, not the absolute greatest situation. We could try getting into maybe some combat up here with some more normal enemies, that kind of thing. And like I said, there probably are trouble spots in the game, as there are with most games that get worse than typical performance, and I'm certainly not trying to suggest I have played enough of the game to tell you how representative this area is. But yeah, it looks like 30-ish FPS experience if you try to play at a native 1080p low on the 1060. I can tell you it certainly feels a lot better at 60 FPS. Maybe we could try out FSR a little bit before we're done. Now, this mentions frame generation if you read the tooltip there, but it doesn't seem to actually be doing frame generation from FSR 3. It does seem to just be actual FSR upscaling. So I just went down to FSR performance mode. That is also a 540p internal resolution. The difference is we're now using the FSR upscaling versus before when we were using the Unreal Engine TAA based, I'm guessing it's probably, oh man, I'm spacing the name for it, TSR, is that what they call it in Unreal Engine 5? Temporal Super Resolution. Yeah, still looks quite pixelated with FSR here. By the way, when I mentioned playing on the Steam Deck, I am pretty sure it defaulted to the same kind of low settings on everything with 50% resolution scale as well. But yeah, it seems like in just at least these normal type combat areas that I've been able to get into so far, the game does seem completely playable, albeit with some stuttering on the min-spec hardware. You guys saw I did get that one crash, but that one crash, like I said, in my few hours of play is the only real noticeable crash I ran into. A lot of my play has been on Steam Deck though, so maybe that's different. I've also played on my high-end 4090 based system, and maybe we'll take a look at stuff a little bit stronger, see what we can do. And I'm gonna pop in some other hardware, to try out some other GPUs. All right, let's do the opposite of minimum specs. I went ahead and put in the RTX 4090, and we're over onto my 7800X 3D based CPU system with 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 CL30 memory. If you don't know what all that means, it means it's basically one of the fastest gaming setups that you can build. Let's see how the game does here at 4K resolution now, 100% resolution scale. No DLSS, no FSR. The game, by the way, launched with DLSS frame generation available, but the developers have removed that for the time being due to it apparently causing crashing and being one of the causes of the reported crashes. I've gone ahead and not gone with the auto settings, which turned a couple things down to high. I went ahead and just cranked everything to ultra so that we can just see the game absolutely maxed out on high-end hardware. Looks like we're around 60 FPS when we are in the normal realm. But like I mentioned before, there's a umbral realm. If you hold left trigger, you open up a lantern, which can see into like a spirit world called the umbral world, which is kind of cool that you have both of these layered on top of each other. But I will say the umbral world does seem to have a bit more of a performance hit. Notice if I put the lantern away, we're more in this 60 FPS range, although turning over here, we still can dip, 58, 57. If I open up the lantern, we're now down into the lower 50s. And you can also completely enter the umbral plane by either dying or holding X with your lantern out. And now we are in the umbral land, and you can see that I'm actually dipping into the 50-ish and even seeing into the 40s here a little bit with this enabled. And again, I'm sure there are some locations of the game that are probably a lot more demanding than the areas I have been to so far. So let's go ahead and stress things out a bit in the umbral plane, climbing the stairs, getting into this area. You can see there's still some frame time graph stutters as we climb the stairs, even on a 4090 and 7800X 3D based system. So that's just gonna be some Unreal Engine stutter that we see in most Unreal Engine games, and it does seem like it is present here. Let's get into a bit of combat. You can see some of my health bars grayed out. There's a withered health system in this, where you can claw back that gray health by attacking enemies, unless you get hit, in which case all of it will then disappear. This guy's kind of annoying. These guys have a lot of magic and stuff. Man, I should really be dodging, but I'm not. I'm not paying enough attention. Okay, I died in the umbral world, which means I am actually dead. So we'll go back to the campfire, and we'll use that as, we'll pretend I meant for that to happen, because now we should come back to the non-umbral world. We can run through that same area and notice that frame rates are actually going to be better. Again, remember we are still at maximum settings, but here max settings doing the exact same thing. We're gonna be much more likely to be well over 60 frames per second. We still get a frame time spike as I run up the stairs. So again, as you transition areas in Unreal Engine, it seems like that's gonna happen. This time I'll actually hit my frame time averages. I should have done that before, I guess I forgot. Get into a little bit of this combat. But you can see the game definitely at max settings and max resolution here. We're dipping into the 50s, and this is on a 4090, but again, we're on full 4K resolution with everything absolutely, completely maxed out. Once I'm not in combat and therefore about to die, I think we will try out DLSS and maybe adjust some other graphics settings a little bit as well, because yes, it's definitely not locking to 60 even on a 4090, but full 4K resolution honestly is just kind of being stubborn. I do think that DLSS quality at 4K resolution looks good enough that it would be kind of silly not to use, especially in Unreal Engine 5. I've noticed that so much stuff in this engine seems to scale with resolution. It really feels like it's not designed to play games on Unreal Engine 5 at native resolution. You can see here that with DLSS quality enabled, we're now completely maxed out at around 100 frames per second. Yes, we seem to have almost doubled our performance using DLSS quality. Granted, I did also kill the enemies. So really, I think it makes sense to upscale in this game, and I know we're seeing a trend of games where, that unfortunately seems to be just kind of how the game is designed. It really seems to be the trend, especially with Unreal Engine 5. Then again, we see weird games like Forza. Whoa, we saw a big stutter right there. Did you guys see that one? Frame time graph spike too. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the boss fight and see what happens. I probably should have healed first, but I want us to look at this cutscene on the RTX 4090 system, because I want to see if the stuff still stutters and loads in slowly as we transition. Yeah, so you still get the slow load in, like pop in of the details on the armor there, which is unfortunate. And if you watch the frame time graph, we still get stutters every time it transitions, which is a little bit unfortunate that even on the highest end hardware you can get, we're still seeing those issues. Let me go ahead and use a Estus flask. I'll call it that, I know. Anyway, I don't know what it's called in this game yet. To get a little bit of this combat to kind of sort out performance in this area. And then I think before we go, we should try something a bit more mid-range. We've tried low end, we've tried high end. What about something a little more mid-range before we go? All right, we're on an RTX 3060 12 gigabytes, and I decided to let the game go with its default settings, and I tried out the Umbral world because we saw that in this area that was a bit more demanding. And we're at 1080p resolution and currently no upscaling. The graphics preset I went with, again, was auto set. And the biggest things I'm noticing here are, if you actually read through these, global illumination quality and reflection quality mention that if they go up above medium, so if you go to high or better, they do mention a ray traced solution. Now I'm curious, that's gotta be Unreal Engine 5's Lumen, which is a software-based ray tracing, but can also be hardware accelerated. And it's unclear to me, without more information, which that would be using. But again, this defaulted to those kind of off. Looks like we are down in the 50s here in the Umbral world, but if we do rest and get back into the normal world, I think our frame rate will probably go up. Yeah, looks like we are closer into the 60s. So it's actually kind of interesting. If you look at frame rate numbers, the performance here at these settings and at 1080p resolution seems to be very similar to the performance numbers we were getting from the 4090 when we were at 4K resolution and completely maxed out ultra settings. Again, before we turned on upscaling. So yeah, it looks like these are defaulting to settings that aren't going to be a locked 60 frames per second, and we still, again, frame time graph, we still get stutters at times. But it doesn't look terrible or anything like that on the 3060. And again, I don't love upscaling at 1080p resolution, but considering how well performance responded at 4K to upscaling, I do want to test that out. So we're on DLSS quality, apply changes, reset my frame rate counter. And like I said, I don't love upscaling at 1080p, but the amount of performance benefit you get from it in Unreal Engine 5 seems to be absolutely massive. Here we're jumping up into the 80s, and I should probably pay at least some attention to the combat I'm in right here. These guys are no joke, especially the guy with the big sword and magic. So I'm gonna be dodge rolling a little bit, and we can get some performance check while we're in combat. Again, remember we're still on the high-end CPU. I didn't go back to a lower-end CPU, so do keep that in mind. Here, we'll get back to the Umbral world, and I'll even pretend that was on purpose. So remember, the first time you die, you go into the Umbral world before actually resetting to a checkpoint or whatever. I can use a healing potion. And I think I'm gonna kill this guy, and then we'll try out some other graphics settings a little bit. Okay, so again, in the Umbral world, and especially when we had the combat going, we were in the 70s. With that guy dead, we might be performing a little bit better here. But yeah, especially if you're willing to upscale, it looks like using these default medium-ish, medium-high-ish settings doesn't seem too bad. Let's go ahead and go to ultra everything. Am I getting attacked? Hey, that's cheating. Again, some games don't respond well to changing in-game, and I haven't restarted, but clearly performance went down. So now we're down here in the mid-50s, and this is still with the upscaling enabled. And I could actually restart the game just to confirm that that's not just a restart issue. All right, this is after a restart in the same area. We're still in the mid-50s. So it does seem like it was fine without the restart, although you never know with games. They can be picky, so it's always best practice to restart on a graphic setting change. This is still with DLSS on quality. If we're not upscaling at max settings, it now looks like we are dipping into the 30s. So once again, even if you're playing at 1080p, I think it would still be optimal from the visual quality to frame rate standpoint, I think, to upscale. That is definitely seeming like it helps out quite a bit. Let me take this guy out before we play with settings anymore. Remember, we all are in the Umbral world right now, which did seem to be a bit more demanding. I'm going to go ahead and kick DLSS back on for the better base frame rate. But then the next thing I wanted to look at was graphic settings wise. Like I said, I have a feeling it's going to be the big ones are the global illumination. Let's drop that down to medium. And look, just taking global illumination down to medium now has us, I'm going to restart the averages, but it now has us, remember we still have DLSS quality on, but we are now in the 60s rather than dipping into the 50s, just by leaving everything ultra except for global illumination down to medium. Let's go ahead and also take a look at what if I bring reflection quality down to medium as well. Looks like that gave us a bit of a bump. So yeah, honestly, it looks like just knocking those two settings down to medium has made a pretty big difference. The global illumination seems to be the biggest one. And if I turn upscaling off, we're still not great, but we're in the 40s rather than the 30s. So that is certainly a lot better. So yeah, I think optimizing settings-wise, it certainly looks like those are the two biggest changes, especially the global illumination down to medium. Yes, there's a visual impact, but it was a large performance impact. And the next one is, like I said, upscaling seems to be the biggest deal. This isn't going to be enough time for me to do a full optimized settings guide. But the other thing I'd like to look at is what if we just turned everything down to low, and just look at what kind of performance gain we got from that. So it looks like we're up over 100 now, 120-ish. Again, full system restart would be best, but we didn't notice any massive issues not doing that. And I am a little pressed for time here, so I turned DLSS off. So it looks like going everything down to low. We are now over 60 FPS, but I think there's getting to be more enemies now. Do you see the eyeball in the top right of the screen? So I think the longer you're in the Umbral realm, the more the enemy has their eye on you, and the more creatures you start drawing against you. Anyway, so yeah, it looks like there is some amount of scalability in the graphic settings, considering down at low settings, we are, in the 60 to 70 FPS range here with combat in the Umbral world. Whereas at max, ultra everything settings, we were dipping into the 30s. And then if you combine that with the, upscaling at the quality setting, we get another healthy bump. So I'm going to be honest, guys, I did get that one crash. I haven't got a huge amount of crashing, and I know I'm not playing on the initial day one patch. This was, well, I guess the second day one patch, which was supposed to help with stability a bit by turning off things like frame generation, but overall, I don't think the performance is too terrible as long as you tweak the settings, and the auto-selected settings weren't complete nonsense, and it looks like, again, a little bit of upscaling goes a long way in this game. So I certainly don't hate it. I'm getting, like I said, definitely some stutters, and I didn't, like I said, like in the cinematics, I'm sure even at these settings, we're probably going to see some objects kind of popping, that thing's loading in on the armor like we've seen before, loading in slowly. The camera pan, there's not going to be a lot of cutscenes in the game as far as I know, though. So anyway, I'm not going to make it long in this combat, considering I'm already mostly dead. But I think we'll end the video here. That you guys seen the performance I'm getting. By no means have I played a super long way into the game, so I can't give you full thoughts on everything. But it does seem to have a good amount of scalability and a little bit of Unreal Engine stutter. It was playable on my 1060 and my Steam Deck, at least for the first couple hours of the game. So I don't know, guys. I'm not finding as large of issues as the comments and articles I read about it seemed to make me initially think we were going to see. But maybe you guys could tell me how the game's working out for you. Those shadows look weird. But I guess we're on the low settings now, so that's just the low shadows flickering. All right, guys, that's what I have time for. I'm actually enjoying the game. I don't know if it, I'll continue to enjoy the game, but so far it feels very Dark Soulsy, and I'm enjoying it. I'm probably gonna keep on playing it off camera. I hope all of you have an excellent day.